The summer of 1858. London is the center of the world, the capital of the British Empire upon which the sun never sets. A city of luxury, industrial progress, and immense wealth. But the moment you approached the banks of the Thames, the grandeur of the empire vanished instantly. Instead of a fresh river breeze, citizens were hit by a wave of a stench so foul it caused people to faint in the streets. This wasn't just a bad smell. It was a thick, sour, nauseating cloud of decay that you could practically touch with your hands. History would record this summer as the Great Stink. It would force Queen Victoria to flee her palace, paralyze the work of Parliament, and ultimately change the face of modern cities forever. Today, we dive into the sewage of Victorian London to understand how a metropolis of 3 million turned into a giant cesspool. To understand the catastrophe of 1858, we have to look at the numbers. In just 50 years, London's population doubled. By mid-century, over 2.5 million people lived here. It was the largest city on the planet. But there was one problem. London's infrastructure was still medieval. Imagine a typical house of that era. You have no plumbing in the modern sense. Under your floorboards or in the backyard lies a cesspit, a brick-lined hole in the ground. Everything goes there. When the pit overflows, you call night soil men, laborers, who for a fee shovel out the filth at night and haul it to farms outside the city. But progress played a cruel joke on Londoners. First came the flushing toilet. The wealthy loved them, but cesspits began to overflow 10 times faster. Second, the authorities tried to clean the city by allowing cesspits to be connected to old street gullies meant only for rainwater. And where did those gullies lead? Exactly, straight into the Thames, the very same river from which most Londoners still drew their water for drinking and cooking. The Thames became an open sewer, receiving daily tons of human waste, blood from slaughterhouses, and chemicals from factories.
It's hard to imagine today, but in 1858 the stink wasn't just a nuisance, it was a national crisis. But before the chaos, let's see how Londoners actually lived.
Victorian-era people knew nothing of bacteria. The dominant medical belief of the time was the miasma theory. It was believed that diseases like cholera or typhus spread through bad air and foul odors. If you could smell the rot, you were in danger. And cholera was indeed slaughtering thousands. 1831, 1849, 1853, outbreaks hit one after another. Physician John Snow had already proven that the culprit was the water, not the air. He even famously removed the handle from the Broad Street water pump to stop an epidemic. But the establishment didn't believe him. Authorities continued to flush waste into the river, believing that cleansing the streets and letting the filth flow into the Thames was the way to save the city. In reality, they were just concentrating death in one place. In 1855, the scientist Michael Faraday wrote to the Times. He dropped pieces of white paper into the river, and they vanished from sight just an inch below the surface. The water wasn't water. It was a thick, opaque, brown liquid. Then came the summer of 1858. It was unnaturally hot. Temperatures in the shade hit 35 degrees Celsius and in the sun nearly 50. The water level in the Thames dropped, exposing years of accumulated fecal matter and trash on the riverbanks. Under the scorching sun, this cake began to bake. The stench became so unbearable that life in central London ground to a halt. Queen Victoria, during a short boat trip on the royal yacht, pressed a handkerchief to her nose and ordered an immediate return to shore. The journey lasted only a few minutes. Most ironically, the Houses of Parliament sit right on the banks of the Thames. Politicians who had ignored the sewage problem for years suddenly found themselves at ground zero. The curtains in the Westminster Palace were soaked in chloride of lime to mask the smell, but it did nothing. Members of Parliament were seen fleeing the chambers with handkerchiefs pressed to their faces. The press mocked them. We can conquer India, we can pay the largest debts in the world, but we cannot clean our own river. When the threat of disease loomed over the lawmakers themselves, a bill to fund a new sewage system was passed in a record 18 days.
Fear of the smell forced the government to act. One member of Parliament called the Thames a Stygian pool that radiated unbearable horrors.
The man who saved London was the engineer Joseph Bazalgette. His plan was grand and incredibly expensive. He didn't just want to clean the Thames, he decided to completely redraw the city's underground world. He created 82 miles, or 130 kilometers, of main intercepting sewers, and over 1,100 miles, or 1,700 kilometers, of street drains. His idea was simple. Catch the waste before it hit the Thames in the city center and funnel it through pipes far to the east toward the sea using gravity and massive steam-powered pumps. Bazalgette was a perfectionist. He used the strongest material available, Portland cement, which actually grew stronger in water. But most importantly, he calculated the pipe diameter for a population of 3.5 million and then said, "We only build this once," and doubled the diameter. It is thanks to this decision that London's Victorian sewers worked perfectly for over 150 years, handling the load of a modern megacity. Construction was finished by 1875. The result was instant. Cholera vanished from London forever. The Victoria, Albert, and Chelsea embankments that we walk on today are actually lids covering Bazalgette's giant tunnels. The Great Stink was a lesson for the entire world. It proved that you cannot build a great civilization if you cannot solve the problem of your own waste. London stopped being dirty Father Thames and became a blueprint for Paris, New York, and Berlin. Today, London is building a new tideway super sewer because the city has grown once again. But the foundation of our urban comfort was laid back then in the blistering summer of 1858, when one unbearable smell forced an entire empire to finally look down at its feet.